Hey guys, so today we're going to work on configuring NTP in this lab. So NTP is Network Time Protocol, and pretty much what it does is it syncs the time across devices using across devices in the network to something called the reference clock. So the reference clock is pretty much just a very accurate time. It's like usually like a atomic clock or like a GPS clock. So reference clock is like atomic clock or GPS clock. And in the hierarchy of devices, it's considered something we call a stratum zero. So it's pretty much at the top of the hierarchy. Every device that's connected to it after that, it increases its stratum by one. So stratum one would be the primary server, stratum two, secondary server, and then so on until we reach 15. After 15, any device that's connected is considered unreliable. Like the connection is considered unreliable. It wouldn't trust that time. So, what's the benefit of using NTP? So, in, if we're using NTP, it one of the things is it saves us time from configuring the clock on every device individually. So if we have like 20 routers in our network, we don't have to configure the time on all 20 routers manually. And then on top of that, if we did configure it manually, there's something called time drift. So basically over a long period of time, eventually those times on the clocks that we set for each router, they're eventually going to be incorrect. They're not going to be synced up to the same time. So instead what we do is we do this and have it connect over NTP so that it all references the same clock, so that they're all within just a few milliseconds of each other, and it's as close as possible to being the same time. And that's something that's really useful for like event logging, and when you need to figure out when, like, let's say a port went down or a router went down, switch went down, so that we're able to troubleshoot. So that being said, let's get into this lab and configure NTP across our network. So first thing that we're being asked to do is configure the software clock on R1, R2, and R3 as 12 o'clock December 30th, 2020 UTC. And after that, we're asked to configure the time zone for these devices as well. So I'm EST as my time zone, and let me configure that. Let's start on R1. So first we're going to enable, and then first thing we're going to do is configure the software clock. There's a software clock and a hardware clock. It's also called a calendar clock, and it's best to have those synced to the same time. But let's just go through these steps first, because I think we're going to end up doing that later in this lab. So first, we're on R1, and then let's do clock set to 12 o'clock December 30th, 2020. By default, the time set is to UTC. And let me just show clock. See, it's automatically set to UTC. And this is the time I just set. And then comp T, clock time zone is EST, and it's -5 for the time adjustment from UTC. So let's do show clock. So, and then do show clock detail. You see that it says the time source is user configuration. That means I manually configured it. I didn't configure it using NTP. So later in the lab, you'll see we'll configure it using NTP. But for now, it's asking us to manually configure. So let's just get practice doing that on R2 and R3. So R2, enable, clock set to 12. Oh shoot, clock set to 12. December 30th, 2020. Comp T, clock time zone, EST -5. R3, same thing. Clock set to 12. December 30th, 2020. clock time zone is EST -5. Yep. Okay, so we did step 1 and we did step 2. Now let's go to step 3. Step 3 is asking us to configure R1 to synchronize to the NTP server 1.1.1.1 over the internet. So this is the NTP server. What is the stratum? What is stratum 1.1.1.1? What is stratum of R1? So the NTP server, this is what would be connected to the reference clock. And then R1 is what's connecting to the NTP server. So when we set this up and synchronize R1 to the NTP server, what we should see is stratum for NTP server. Stratum for the server should be 1, and then stratum for R1 should be 2. Because this, like I said, is connected to the reference clock. This is connected to the primary server, so we're increasing the stratum by 1. So let's do that now. R1, we're gonna do NTP server, and then this is the IP address that we're connecting to for the NTP server. Now what I'm gonna do real quick, do show clock detail. So now you see the time source is NTP. Before it was user configuration. Now we connected to the server over this IP address, and it's changed the time source to NTP. Now to see the stratum, just to be safe and make sure that this synced and updated, I'm just gonna fast forward in packet tracer a bit, and then let's do show NTP associations, or yeah, association. So what we could see is the stratum for the address 1.1.1 is 1, like I had said. And then let's check the stratum for R1. So do show NTP status. So the clock is synchronized. Stratum is 2, and the reference is 1.1.1. So, like I had said, the stratum for the NTP server 1, stratum for R1 is stratum 2. Okay. Now it's asking us to configure R1 as stratum 8 NTP master and synchronize R2 and R3 with authentication. So also it says NTP source command isn't available in packet tracer, so we're just using the physical interface IP address of R1. Okay, so basically, well, let's just tackle the first first part of step 4. So it's asking us to configure R1 as stratum 8 NTP master. So if you configure NTP master, by default the stratum is 8, so we don't even have to ask. See, normally you could set what you want the stratum number to be for NTP master, but by default it's 8, so we don't have to actually configure and tell it to put it as 8. Next, to set up authentication, we're setting up authentication between R1, R2, R3. NTP authenticate to enable authentication, and NTP, I believe it was authentication key, and then the key number, so let's just use 1, and then the key that we want to use, let's just use CCNA. So that's going to be the key. Let me try that one more time. Then MD5, and then the key, which is going to be CCNA. And then what's the next step that we had? Oh, we're still configuring authentication, sorry. So then the trusted key for is going to be what we just created, the CCNA or key 1. So it's going to be NTP trusted key 1. Sorry, trusted key and then 1. And we're pretty much going to do the same thing for R2 and R3 in terms of the authentication. So R2 enable conti NTP authenticate NTP authentication key is 1 MD5 and the key is going to be CCNA. NTP trusted key is going to be key 1. And then it's asking us to make R1 the server for R2. So NTP server is going to be 192.168.12.1. 192.168.12.1. And then here we're going to have to enter the key, which is going to be key 1. So authentication key 1. Okay, should be it for R2. Let's just check. So show clock, do show clock detail, time source is NTP, do show clock associations, or sorry, NTP association, not clock associations. And the reference is .12.1, which is what we had set to R1. And the stratum for R1 is 2, like we had mentioned. So that means the stratum for R2 should be 3. So let's just check that. So do show NTP status. Stratum for R2 is 16. Let me sync this one more time. Or let me skip forward and try to run this one more time and see if it's synced properly. Okay, there we go. So fast forwarded the time a bit in packet tracer and ran show NTP status again. Stratum is 3, which is what we had expected. So now let's do the same thing on R3. So enable T NTP authenticate to enable authentication. NTP authentication key is going to be 1, and then the key is going to be, or MD5, and then the key is going to be CCNA, and then NTP trusted key is 1. And then we're going to make the server, NTP server, 192.168.13.1. And then the key for it is CCNA, or key 1 rather, sorry. Okay, so now let's just do the same thing. Let's just skip forward a bit since we saw we had that error for R2. It showed the wrong stratum. Let's do show clock detail. Time source is NTP. And then let's do show NTP associations. So it's a stratum 2 is 192.168.13.1, which is R1. And then show NTP status. This should be 3 because it's R3's stratum. Yep, and we got stratum 3. Okay, so we're completed with step 4, and now step 5. So this is what I had mentioned earlier. Normally you sync the hardware and software clocks. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is clock update calendar. Clock sorry, it's not clock update, it's a NTP, and then it should be update calendar. So that's all you got to do, and you just do it on R1, R2, NTP update calendar. And R3 NTP update. Sorry. NTP update calendar. And that's it for this lab. And if you just want to see, just to make sure, the time and that all 3 of these devices are synced for their clocks, just pull up all 3 really quick. R1, R2, and R3. So what I'm going to do is show clock detail. So this is R1. Show clock detail. This is R2. Show clock detail. This is R3. So you can see the times, the dates, they all got adjusted. They all sync to, well, R2, R3 is syncing to R1. R1 is syncing to the server is syncing to the reference clock. So these times are all fairly close, like fairly accurate. It's like it's off probably by like fractions of a second, and their time source for all these is NTP. They're not manually configured. Okay, so that's how you configure NTP on devices, and the importance of NTP in your network.